Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. A long-time watcher of the channel had brought to my attention a build that they've been playing in this league that looked like a lot of fun, and it's something I want to try. I've never played Bone Shatter before, and so I wanted to present the core ideas that make this build function, then look at how I'm going to try and bring them together on a lower budget. So this is the Trauma Stacking Juggernaut 3.18 edition. If you want to see some footage of what this build looks like in both Delirious maps and also other content, I'll put a link down in the description below to footage that's been taken by the player that inspired me to make this. I will give you a warning firstly, this build is absolutely unplayable in solo self-found. It is also pretty much unplayable under about 8 Exalted Orbs in trade, and for the build to come fully online, you're going to want to have Ashes of the Stars, which is about 45 exalts at the time I'm recording this video, plus about 20 to 30 exalts worth of other crafted gear. You don't need all of that stuff, and you can assemble it piece by piece, but obviously Ashes of the Stars is a very expensive piece of the puzzle. It's not absolutely mandatory, and we will discuss budget options to it. So, firstly, a quick note that build designs are a team effort, and every team has someone whose main job is publicity, not so much theory crafting. That's me. The parts of this that are entirely my work mostly come down to some of the crafting things we'll get to in a later follow-up video, and some budget ideas. This is loosely based upon a build by Jarmon. Now, I hadn't seen this build, and this ultimately inspired Daed, who is a long-time viewer of the channel, to tinker around with it and make a version that he thought worked a bit better than the original one. And this ultimately is Daed's build with a number of changes that have been made to it. There's also undoubtedly influence of others that have had a little bit of work on this build that I'm not aware of. So firstly, the first core mechanic is that we are going to be stacking trauma with Divergent Bone Shatter. So Divergent Bone Shatter is one of the rarer alternate quality gems. It does something quite unique and powerful, and that is that each trauma stack that you get will add to attack speed. The amount that it adds to attack speed is 1/20th of the gem's quality, rounded down. So we're going to try and stack that quality high, potentially 40% on a low budget, 60% on a medium to high budget, and 80% on an extremely high budget. This will then allow you to get a massive amount of increased attack speed, because we're going to be trying to set up a situation, to engineer a situation where we're going to be mapping with 250, 300, even 400 trauma on the character. Now, obviously, mapping with 400 trauma on the character, you're going to be doing a staggering amount of damage to yourself. We're going to get to that later. So there is a balancing act here. Gem levels and trauma both scale up the self-damage of Divergent Bone Shatter. There's a bit of a sweet spot, and we believe this to be gem level 8 and 60 quality on a high budget, gem level 8 with 40 quality on a medium budget, and while gem level 20 does miles more damage, it causes just unmanageable amounts of increased self-damage. Even still, we will hit a point where you can't keep attacking at full speed, and at that point you will need to take your finger off the throttle a little bit. That said, by the time you hit that point, you're probably doing something like 55, 60 million damage per second, and so most things are falling over dead really quickly. In practice, you'll be killing tier 16 map bosses with 100% delirium in play in about 12 to 13 seconds. You'll be able to deal with bosses like the Simulacrum Wave 30, and you'll also be able to kill some of the Uber bosses, and Daed killed the Cortex's 4th wave in exactly 5 seconds. So the second core mechanic is Mantra of Flames. So unlike real life, in Path of Exile, trauma is a buff. 300 stacks of trauma is 300 buffs. And that means that this simple jewel is where almost all of your damage comes from. And it's why we're going to use some pretty unusual attack weapons that have very low base damage on them. Now, this item should be Divine Perfect. We don't care about the fire damage to spells, but we do care about that fire attack damage. You need that to be 5 to 12. In Trade League, that'll be easy because this is a very common item. So in Trade League, this item is common enough that you can even plausibly corruption hunt it. Don't worry about doing this until you're willing to invest more in the build, but you should be able to find a 5 to 12 fire attack damage per buff on you, Mantra of Flames cheap enough that you can just get a bunch of them and just corrupt them and fish for those juicy best corrupts. Good corrupts include things like 1% fire penetration, corrupting blood immunity, or 2% increased mana reservation efficiency. So the third core mechanic of the build is Trauma Duration. Trauma defaults to expiring after 6 seconds, again unlike real life. We want this to be longer so that we can get lots and lots of trauma so that we can take advantage of all of the mechanics we've discussed so far. We're going to be taking Exceptional Performance and Potency of Will on the passive tree. Now there are 2 ways to pick up Potency of Will. Daed originally had done so by the use of a very large ring Thread of Hope, but it can actually be done better with an Impossible Escape Jewel with a Necromantic Aegis, which was available for 1.4 exalts before I recorded this video. Sorry if it goes up, but if it does go up, well, at least you got the fallback option of the very large ring Thread of Hope. And then you'll also need to take duration mastery nodes and all sorts of things like that. We're going to anoint Enduring Bond, which is going to seem really out of place because it's a minion node, but it does grant 20% unconditional skill effect duration, as well as all the other effects we don't use, and this is enough for it to be the best option. We're going to extend the duration of trauma even further via a self-curse temporal chains. This is going to be in the unique ring Rotblood Promise. Now, when safe, we're going to use Malevolence linked to Eternal Blessing and Life Tap so that we can temporarily reserve a lot of our life. We'll recover that pretty quickly, and then that will give us increased duration again. Finally, our main skill is going to be linked to increased duration support because that adds even more damage there. Our fourth core mechanic is physical damage mitigation. This build is going to, as a side effect of all of the mitigation it's putting into preventing dying from trauma stacking, it's actually going to be able to tank Uber Shaper Slams. Trauma is well named, it hurts a lot. We're going to mitigate this with the unique armor Doppelganger Guise. Fair warning, this is a very rare boss drop from the Maven. This is the rarest item on the Maven's loot table, but it's not that expensive. I was able to pick up a 6-linked one for 4 exalts before recording this video. Might go up a little bit as a result of this video if this does get a bit of traction and a lot of people try to copy it, but even then, it's probably going to be available at a reasonable price. We're going to use Arctic Armor, Divergent if possible. We're going to be using Endurance Charges, we're going to be using Armor, we're going to be using Fortify. We're going to try to get a Determination Watcher's Eye with the mod that grants physical damage reduction whilst you're under the effect of Determination. We're going to be a Juggernaut, and that's going to give us the Unbreakable node as well as a bunch of other defenses. We're going to have Cast when damage taken linked to Immortal Call, and we're going to have Enduring Cry with 100% uptime. Lots and lots and lots of mechanics here that are going to cause us to be able to scale physical damage mitigation to the moon. And as I say, you will be able to laugh off a Shaper Slam even from the Uber Shaper with this setup. The fifth core mechanic we're using is the Javaquah Glorious Vanity Jewel. So the one that Daed had was better than most, and that was bathed in the blood of 2490 sacrificed in the name of Javaquah. This does need to be in a specific spot on the passive tree. Now what you're looking for here is the fact that it's sacrificed in the name of Javaquah means that the nearby keystone will be changed to Divine Flesh. Divine Flesh means that Energy Shield no longer serves any defensive benefit, but in exchange for that drawback, 50% of elemental damage will be taken as chaos damage instead, and we are going to have some massive chaos damage mitigation. Firstly, we're mitigating chaos damage through the use of Doppelganger Guise, which is going to reduce 40% of it, assuming that your Doppelganger Guise is Divine Perfect. Additionally, Divine Flesh grants 5% to maximum chaos resistance, and then when we get around to shield crafting, which will be another video, you're going to be looking at getting 3% maximum chaos resistance or 2% maximum all resistances on your shield. So lots of things there that all come together to grant you a staggering amount of mitigation against chaos damage, which then means that in conjunction with Glorious Vanity and Divine Flesh, you also have significant mitigation against elemental damage as well. Now, the thing that's really strong here with the 2490 jewel, and you might be able to find another one that does this, is that it has Cult of Chaos as well. This is something that changes the node berserking on the jewel that I saw, and it grants 18 chaos resist and 1% maximum chaos resist. Cult of Chaos is pretty rare, but it's not like it's rarer than any of the other specific Vaal notables, and so you might find this just by buying different Javaquah jewels, put them in your passive tree, and see if there's a Cult of Chaos you can easily path to. The best spot for it is berserking, but you could also use it in Martial Experience or Command of Steel. They would all be good options to get there as well. Our sixth core mechanic is Endurance Charges. You have a baseline 3 charges, plus 3 from the passive tree, plus 1 from being a Juggernaut, plus 1 from the Chieftain's Valako Storm's Embrace, which is gained through Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh. Time I'm recording this, that's a couple exalts. Now you can do better than that if you can get the Uber Searing Exarch and the Uber Eater of World version of the Marauder jewels, in which case you'll get a different node instead that is far superior, but that is when we're talking about going to a budget of 3/4 of a mirror for the build. You can then get plus 1 extra charge from synthesized boots, which are pretty cheap, a synthesized shield, which is cheap, and a synthesized ring, which is a few exalts. If you have to skimp on one of these, the thing to skimp on is the synth ring, or you could skimp on the Valako Storm's Embrace. One of those you can do without, but the more endurance charges you can get, the better. Now, the next mechanic that we're talking about is extreme quality gems. This is a build that wants to get certain gems to 40, 60, even 80 quality. We're going to be doing this through the use of Ashes of the Stars at a high budget and Enhance at a lower budget. In fact, we'll still use Enhance on the higher budget versions, but at different breakpoints. So there's no getting around it. Ashes of the Stars is god tier on this build, and it's dozens of exalts, but I do think we can make it work without it. This item is going to help Temporal Chains, it's going to help Anomalous Malevolence, it's just going to do a lot. So the non-budget option is Enhance 3, a link to a native 14 quality Bone Shatter gem. Then add 30 quality from Ashes, and you're looking at a total of 60. The Bone Shatter on a budget version actually interestingly uses Enhance level 4 instead. That provides 24 quality with a natively 16 quality gem for a total of 40. The extreme high-end option requires Forbidden Flame, Indomitable Resolve to survive, which currently at the time I'm recording this video is upwards of 75 Exalted Orbs. This requires an Awaken Enhance 5, or alternately Enhance 4 in conjunction with a +1 from a Chest Corrupt, a native 18 quality on the Bone Shatter gem, and then that with Ashes of the Stars combines to a total of 80. That is the highest breakpoint that you can reach without ridiculous investment, and is going to be very, very powerful indeed. Here's the passive tree, and here is Daed's Path of Building guide. So this is his character as it existed prior to us discussing a few potential improvements to the belt, the weapon, and other slots. I do think we can do quite a bit better than the weapon that he's got there. We can also do quite a bit better than his helmet, although he has already made this change. He has upgraded the Eldritch mods on it so that it's now perfect tier Eldritch Temporal Chains effect, which is 36%, and it's also a grand tier for the fire penetration on it. So that's quite a bit better, and my improvements to weapons and belts and the like will come in a later video. Now, as we say, this build, as we see here, is not budget friendly and it relies upon Ashes of the Stars. But if you don't have Ashes of the Stars, and I expect most people viewing this probably can't afford it at the moment, you can make the build work with a cheaper amulet, as long as that amulet has some mana reservation on it. And once you've got that, you will take Champion of the Cause in place of Galvanic Hammer. So there's 4 points allocated on the passive tree to Galvanic Hammer in the northwest corner. You're going to drop those and instead take the 3 points to get Champion of the Cause down here. That will enable you to get access to all of the mana reservation efficiency so that you have a positive amount of mana unreserved. Performance of this build so far. 100% Delirious Tier 16 rare maps are taking about 11.5 to 12 minutes to full clear. Uber Shaper and Uber Cortex are trivial. Face Tank Everything, easy win. Uber Eater of Worlds, Uber Exarch, these are really hard. The build lines up really poorly against the unique challenges of those bosses, and Daed has not had success in beating them yet. The Uber Maven and Uber Duber Elder, the mechanics of these fights are very important. A lot of the things in the Uber Duber Elder encounter, you'll actually be alright against, but there's a few things that can catch you off guard, and so that fight you're going to need to be pretty good at mechanically dodging things. With Uber Maven, the Uber Maven has a number of ways of blocking your life recovery, and you need to be expert at avoiding those. As long as you're able to do that, then you will be able to beat the Uber Maven fight with this build. Uber Cyrus is not tested yet, but both Daed and I expect it to be a very hard fight that this build is going to line up pretty poorly against, and that's because there is a soft enrage timer of sorts on the Uber Cyrus fight. If the fight goes for too long, the entire arena can be covered in burning ground, and the real problem here is that with Uber Cyrus, you're not going to have all that much time to just get in uninterrupted damage on him. When you're doing uninterrupted damage for a long period of time, this build will take down bosses. It'll get to a massive amount of damage per second. But when you're constantly being interrupted by things like meteors, then at that point you're going to lose all your stacks of trauma, and that's going to put you in a spot where you're going to do a lot less damage when you do get back into the fray. So for that reason, I think that Uber Cyrus might be quite difficult, but that's yet to be tested. Anyways, I'm going to play this build on stream over the next couple of days. I'll level a Juggernaut and get a bit of a sense as to how it goes. And then once I've done that, I'll start transitioning into the build properly, and then we'll be able to see exactly what its strengths and weaknesses are on a low budget. And then at some point, we'll equip an Ashes of the Stars on it and go a little bit nuts. That's all I've got. Mega Orbs have interesting results. If you want to download this presentation, I'll put a link to it down in the description below.